In 2019, nearly 64,000 building permits were issued in the city of Philadelphia, the largest number in the past 6 years. The number of residential building permits have almost doubled in the last decade. Philadelphia is changing. But what if I were to tell you, tucked away in Wissahickon Park, a 19th century house stands just as it did in 1867?
So I became the caretaker at the Hermitage in September 2021. The word got out across Europe that there was this place in the New World to go and practice your religion unobstructed. Johannes Kelpius was a religious scholar, a pietist who was from Transylvania, modern-day Romania, but he was from Transylvania. So all of the hermits lived in little huts or cabins. So they all had little cabins that were kind of spread around these grounds here. And again, with an archaeological dig, you might be able to find some of them buried under, 300 years of soil. But they had a central meeting building that they used as a tabernacle, as a school. They had an observatory where they could study the stars. It was 40 feet by 40 feet. There were 40 of the followers, and so 40 was a very sacred number to them. And there are some people who think that the Hermitage was built on the footprint of the original tabernacle. I don't know if that's true. I have never seen any documentation that says that. It could just be part of the lore, but it's part of a good story. It's, more likely either a root cellar or it was a spring house. There's a lot of stories and a lot of energy and history that go into making the Wissahickon such a special place. And the Cave of Kelpius is one of those things. Often find candles or things arranged in a certain pattern, or you might see something like a tribute to somebody's dad. I mean, that's what I'm guessing from this. So there are a couple of photos here. I'm not really sure who this person is, but so you've got, looks like a dad with a dog here. That's the sort of thing that you often come across inside this cave. They were expecting the woman of the wilderness to appear to signify the end of days, the end times, and that would take them home to God. She never arrived, per their plan. When she didn't arrive, I think people were like, well, what do we do now? After Kelpius died in 1708, that was really when the hermits started to disperse and leave. At some point, this land came into the possession of the Ryder family. So there was a ferry across the Schuylkill River, very close to the mouth of the Wissahickon Creek, that went over to the Montgomery County side. And even now, today, there's a road called Ryder's Ferry Road because it would come down, and that's where you would get on the ferry to go to the other side. The Proutine family came from Russia to the young United States in 1801. This was Ivan Proutine. He was the sort of patriarch. He was a Russian count who, he was a count, so he worked for the Tsar's court in Russia, which in those days was in St. Petersburg. The Proutine family came from St. Petersburg to first to England and then to the United States. And so Ivan Proutine's son, Evan, he was the person who built the Hermitage. He was the person who bought this land from the Ryder family. He named it the Hermitage, which has dual meanings. So one is, of course, a tribute to Kelpius and the hermits who lived on this land before him. But the other part is the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, which still today is the State Museum of Russia. It's the second largest museum in the world.
Still there?
Oh, it hasn't gone away. Say she's a teenager, say she's like, let's say 17 when she made that. You're talking like 1860s when that is from, but it's still there. Will you come, je vous aime, je vous adore. So the Proutines lived here from 1848 to 1895, at which time the Proutine family, it was Evan's son at that point, he sold the house and the property to the city of Philadelphia for $1. And he only sold it for $1, presumably because he sued the city and won about 15 years before that, when the city was trying to acquire the land via eminent domain to establish the park. Because the Fairmount Park Commission was founded in 1868 as a means of protecting the water supply in the city and creating parkland as part of that. So what we know as Fairmount Park now, East and West Fairmount Park along the Schuylkill River, was done to protect the Schuylkill River. So the house itself is pretty, it's nice, but it's kind of understated, it's more elegant than it is flashy. But the chimneys are flashy. There's a thing that's called a historic structure report. None has ever been produced for the Hermitage. So things like, when were the sycamores planted? When were the chimneys installed? Where were the chimneys created? We don't know. Philosophy of historic preservation at large, I think, is very important, especially to a place like Philadelphia. So in Philadelphia, history is the city's brand. Like, we sell ourselves on history. America starts here, Cradle of Liberty and all of that stuff. We have the Liberty Bell, we have Independence Hall, but we have so much more. And because as a big city that is still relatively affordable compared to Washington, D.C., Boston, obviously New York, places like San Francisco, Los Angeles, like those are all very expensive cities to live in. Comparatively speaking, Philadelphia is relatively affordable, and because of that, you have developers who can easily identify, looking at a parcel map, well, here's a big property right here. We can buy that, tear down whatever's there, and then put up, have it rezoned and put up a bunch of buildings, or, put up like one big apartment building that has 100 units, or, something like that. And that stuff changes the look of a city. It changes the look, it changes the story, it changes the experience. And like in my old neighborhood, there was a street where I used to walk down. There was an old church, there were a couple trees, and those things are gone now, and it just feels different. When you walk down the same street, it's very jarring to see like $1.5 million homes in the place of where something that meant a lot to a lot of people used to be. And Philadelphia, in spite of our messaging about being a World Heritage city and being an important historic city, we're pretty bad at historic preservation. We're bad at maintaining our history. And so in the places that are protected, like if they're on the local historic register, that adds a layer of protection for these places. But that's just a starting point. You still have to care for them. You have to have someone living and breathing and like putting energy and effort into this, into these places to make sure that they can continue to be a part of the experience for future generations the way that they have for you. And that's, like, I think, at the heart of kind of what I'm doing here and what other caretakers do at houses like this.